Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining and welcome to today's session on an introduction to PAS 2035. My name is Dunya Medhat and I'm a junior consultant at Turner & Townsend. We are joined today by Julian Voss, a principal consultant also from Turner & Townsend. Just to inform you, this is a Retrofit Information Support and Expertise, or RISE event, which is fully funded by the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero, delivered by Turner & Townsend. We have also been given the following information from the department. We are only able to comment or provide clarifications on the draft Wave 3 guidance, which was published earlier in May at this time. We cannot comment on timings or next steps for SHDF Wave 3 or any other government schemes. When we are able to share anything further, we will do so. Thank you all for joining us again. I will now hand over to Julian to start the presentation.
Thanks, Dunya. Welcome, everyone. My name's Julian Voss. I'm a principal consultant with Turner & Townsend, and this session is quite a high-level introduction to PAS 2035. What is it? Why was it introduced, etc. As Dunya mentioned, if you have any questions, please pop them in the chat and we'll pick those up at the end. Okay, so this is what I'm going to be covering in the session today. Basically, why is PAS necessary? What is it? What's its purpose? What are the core principles? What are the new roles that are being created to support PAS? What's the relationship with Trustmark? How are PAS retrofit programs delivered? Basic statutory requirements, and then key documents relating to PAS 2035 and Trustmark. So, first question, why is PAS necessary? Basically, PAS has come out of a report that followed various poorly delivered retrofit projects back in the sort of early teens, 20 teens, as it were. And it was really about addressing the failures of various projects, many of which were delivered under CESP and CERT programs like that. And some of the outcomes were suboptimal, to say the least. This is an example from Fishwick in Preston. Basically, there were 360 properties in this project, and they were completed in 2013 at a cost of £5 million. And pictures from this scheme, at the top left, you can see some very poorly installed capping to external wall insulation there. Actually, best practice, you would extend the eaves out over the top of that insulation to prevent water actually dripping onto the top of the insulation, which you can see it would be doing from there. With poorly finished capping, the water just ingresses behind the insulation and it can't evaporate away and it soaks the wall behind. So you do end up with all sorts of very, very poor outcomes in terms of damage to the wall, internally mold and damp, damage to decoration, very, very high levels of humidity, etc., etc. So basically, this kind of poorly delivered work, which was also compounded by the installer going bankrupt, so recompense via them, and maybe that's a good thing actually, but you wouldn't want the same people doing the work again. But the cost of remediation to date is estimated to be over £6 million. And then, of course, there's the unintended consequences or the related consequences, maybe, of the impact on people's lives, health, disruption, having to move out while extensive repair work is done, and the general emotional stress caused by bad installation work being carried out to your home. So the repercussions of this kind of quality or lack of were very extensive indeed. So to answer the question, what is PAS 2035? PAS is the British standard for retrofitting dwellings. First published in 2019. The standard outlines how retrofit projects should be managed and delivered. PAS 2035 goes hand in hand with PAS 2030, which is the British standard for installation, commissioning and handover of energy efficiency measures. So primarily PAS 2035 is about the assessment of properties, the design of a retrofit program, and the project management of that program from beginning to end. and PAS2030 is a standard relating to installers and the quality of work which they are contracted to deliver. So in terms of there are other various related PAS number specifications as well, PAS2038 being a retrofit specification for non-domestic buildings. PAS2035 is specifically for domestic buildings. So PAS2035 really is about consideration of the building as a system of elements. So you've got your envelope, the walls, floor, ceiling, roof, windows, doors, how they work as a system of the envelope, where the different elements meet, what kind of considerations that you need, where roofs meet walls meet at corners of a property, etc. There's basically risks of cold bridging that need to be addressed, and those kind of areas are also problem areas where heat loss is amplified, and that can lead to a cold spot where high levels of moisture can condense, leading to mold. And if that is interstitial condensation, i.e. the condensation is within the walls, that can also lead to degradation of the walls and the timbers of floors. So it's basically to approach retrofit with a very, very kind of keen eye on the physical processes involved and the risks around that, both for the building and for the occupants, in terms of the health impacts of high levels of moisture and condensation and damp and mold, and therefore hand in hand with improvements to the fabric of the building, you really do need to have very, very strong consideration for ventilation. So moving on, what is the purpose and function in detail for PAS2035? It is essentially a risk management methodology, and it provides a specification and guidance for the high quality retrofit of domestic buildings. It specifies requirements, including the assessment of dwellings for retrofit, identification and evaluation of improvement options of energy efficiency measures, the design and specification of those measures, whether individual measures or as a package of multiple measures, and monitoring and evaluation of the project on completion and handover. Compliance with PAS2035 has been a requirement of any public supported retrofit schemes since it was introduced. It's intended to be read and used, as I mentioned before, in conjunction with PAS2030, which is the standard for the installation of retrofit measures, and this provides a specification for installation measures. You need to have a certification with PAS2030 for the measure or measures that you are going to be installing. That's to be compliant with PAS2035. So it's not just one, you get PAS2030 certification and you can install any retrofit measure. You get certification for individual measures. So for external wall insulation, or for internal wall insulation, or for floor insulation, loft insulation, etc. Your certification is for specific measures. At the bottom of that slide, you can see there is a link to the BSI website where you can download the latest version of PAS2030 and PAS2035. This is the 2023 version. It's a major update to the 2019 version. There have been various updates to 2019, the last one being in 2022. But this latest version, the 2023 update, is a major reworking of it. Just to recap on the relationship between PAS2035 and PAS2030. PAS2030 compliant retrofit designs and projects really must be installed, retrofit measures must be installed, commissioned, and handed over to the resident by a PAS2030 certified installer, or for the installation of micro generation renewable technologies such as heat pumps, then you would need installers who are MCS certified. That's the micro generation certification scheme. And MCS are the only people that organization are the only people who do that certification. Whereas PAS2030 certification is done by various different scheme providers and companies. I'll come on to that because that is related to Trustmark and is kind of coming up in a few slides' time. The core principles of PAS 2035, it's all about whole house retrofit. So it's considering the home, the dwelling, as a whole system, and basically that system of fabric elements, heating system, ventilation, etc., heat loss, drafts, etc. It all works together, and different adjustments to any one of those elements, the level of occupancy, the heating system settings, etc., all have an impact on that system. So you need to be looking at the whole system in terms of what appropriate measures, if you've got a particular level of budget to do some retrofit work, not all of it, then you would need to know what are the things that you should start with, and basically know without having any regrets about doing certain elements, which if you want to carry on doing retrofit at a later date, you need to do some of the work you've already done. The whole point of PAS 2035 is to come up with kind of approach which absolutely minimizes the risk of doing things which will damage the building, but also will not cost additional funds by doing the right thing at the right time in the right order. So next thing is a professional accountability, really putting in place a professional person with a role that needs to take responsibility for the success or failure of that retrofit project. And if there's a failure, then dealing with it and addressing the failings and sorting it out. It's about bespoke projects. It's recognizing that each home is unique. You might have a terrace of homes which, when originally built, were pretty much identical, but once you've had different levels of occupancy, people putting in different heating systems, changes to windows and doors and various things over the years, those homes are no longer identical. And so you really do need to be treating those homes as individual projects and be sensitive to that. The next principle, build tight, ventilate right, that really is a kind of catchphrase for don't forget the ventilation. When you're making buildings airtight by reducing drafts, maybe you're changing windows and doors and putting external wall insulation or internal wall insulation on the property, etc., you're reducing that background ventilation, the drafts, the uncontrolled ventilation that was there previously. And when you do that, you really need to address that indoor air quality, making sure that there is a ventilation strategy in place which is going to meet the needs of the occupants. The next one is about quality, so reducing the number of defects, improved efficiency, and really kind of maintaining the reputation of retrofit as being something which has huge benefits for residents, and that will underpin market growth, as it says there. Basically, word of mouth, satisfied residents who are experiencing, reduced cost for energy bills and improved health outcomes, comfort, etc., within the home. That goes a long way to spreading the word and getting other people interested and keen to also take part in retrofit projects. Fabric first, that last but not least, it's basically the approach which is that we are aiming to reduce the heat demand as far as possible. So improving the fabric of the building so that the actual heat demand is reduced before then replacing the heating and hot water system, so that you don't install a system which is basically much bigger than necessary. And actually it also means that we're reducing the demand on electricity networks. If you're changing from a gas boiler to a heat pump, then the heat pump's requirements, if you're reducing improving the fabric by 50% in terms of its energy efficiency, then the actual thermal demand of that property is significantly reduced, and that translates into less energy demand on the network. Then there are, within PAS 2035, these new roles, depending on who is going to be taking on these roles. Some people, like qualified RICS surveyors or maybe architects, could do quite a few of these roles simultaneously. But the The major one is the retrofit coordinator. They do need to be qualified to do that job and then registered with Trustmark. And that is the person with the overall responsibility for the project at each stage. And depending on the project, whether it's just one single measure, a low risk measure, they might also do quite a few of the other kind of roles as well. The next is the retrofit assessor. So there's a person, again, qualified to carry out dwelling assessments, and they would supply that data to the retrofit coordinator. The retrofit coordinator would choose the retrofit designer in order to prepare a retrofit design that's looking at the whole property, looking at the details, looking at the risks of cold bridging and associated risks around detailing of external wall insulation relating to, the roof line, to eaves, extensions, etc., etc. So you're really looking at where the risks are with your retrofit design, the different measures that you're specifying, and how those need to be detailed in order to minimize risks of moisture penetration is a very, very important part of that, but also cold bridging. So reducing the risk of, as I said, these kind of low temperature areas on the walls and roofs where moisture can condense, and that can lead to risk around mold. The retrofit installer, as I mentioned before, that's the PAS2030 certified installer who will be actually putting in place the energy efficiency measures, and the retrofit installer is also responsible for the kind of installation commissioning, making sure, so if you're installing energy systems like heat pumps or any other kind of energy system upgrade, you actually make sure that's working properly, and you hand that over as well to the client. And the last one there, the retrofit evaluator. So someone who's qualified to monitor and evaluate the effectiveness of the project, basically looking at the efficiency of the measures, looking to see if they're working as they should, and seeing if the resident is able to use new systems, if it involves heating systems or controls, and that they understand about, let's say, new ventilation systems that might be in place. There might well be, a requirement for additional ventilation, which means that you don't just have the usual extract ventilation in bathrooms and kitchens when someone switches a light on, but actually have those kind of ventilation systems, trickle vents in windows, extracts, which actually run as a sort of background ventilation and then go on to a boost setting if moisture levels go above a certain threshold or carbon dioxide levels go up to a certain threshold, so that those things are able to maintain the kind of indoor air quality that you require. The qualifications for those roles that I've just been talking about are in the latest version of PAS, and they are in the Annex A of the PAS, which are the normative qualifications. So those are the required qualifications. So you'll probably all have heard of Trustmark in relation to PAS. So basically, Trustmark is the only government endorsed quality scheme in the UK, and it covers home improvements in or around the home. It's a quality mark that was established by the government and endorsed within PAS 2035. Ensuring that professionals in the industry adhere to high standards of workmanship, technical ability, and they also prioritize customer protection. It's important to understand that when an installer business becomes PAS 2030 certified through one of the Trustmark scheme providers, then their work must meet PAS 2035 requirements for a project. Work must be overseen, recorded and lodged into the Trustmark data warehouse by a Trustmark registered retrofit coordinator. So through this, we can see that Trustmark is basically ensuring that the right people are involved in the project, that they're registered with Trustmark to say that their qualifications are in place, that they're adept at their role, that they details of the retrofit projects which are being undertaken are lodged within the Trustmark managed data warehouse, And that ends up being a resource for homeowners to access. And in the case, obviously, of social landlords, they can access that information as well. It's also very useful if we were thinking about doing further works to a property to have that lodgement of exactly what works have been done through the retrofit project. And basically anyone, as in members of the public, customers who are using Trustmark registered businesses for the installation of energy efficiency measures, can be confident that that work will be delivered to good quality recognised specifications, and it's also underpinned by a compliance regime through Trustmark. So this diagram basically describes the process of a retrofit project delivery. This is something that's adapted from a diagram in the PAS2035 document, which I mentioned can be downloaded from the BSI website. And this framework must be followed for a retrofit project to be compliant with PAS2035. The clause and annex numbers in there refer to PAS2035 document sections. A detailed delivery plan will help ensure that a retrofit project is delivered smoothly and successfully. And this also helps control the timescales, make sure projects are on budget, and helps to manage expectations with internal and external stakeholders. So you've got obviously different stakeholders such as the resident engagement. You've got various other considerations, possibly planning permission, depending on properties. They could be of historic or local cultural significance. The box on the right there under BS7913, significance assessment, that is where you might need to look at the importance of a conservation area classification or a listed building classification, which there are a significant number in the UK. So basically, as I say, you've got that process is what needs to be followed. The 5 stages in the dark box, one row up from the bottom there, that is basically the installer process, the PAS2030 certified installer process, which you can basically see it says the pre-installation building inspection, installation, testing, commissioning and handover. So that encapsulates the different stages of the installer's responsibility. So in terms of the statutory requirements, in order to comply with the PAS, the retrofit measure installers obviously need to be certified. Actually, at this stage, they can be certified to PAS 2030-2019, which is the older but still current version of PAS, or to PAS 2030-2023, which is the new version. We're in a sort of handover period at the moment where both of these are allowable, but you can't mix them, if you know what I mean. If a project has been started with the 2019 version of PAS, as in PAS 2035-2019, then it needs to keep to that specification all the way through, and the installers need to be certified to PAS 2030-2019 as well. Same version. Up till I think it's March 2025, you can still start projects with that older version or with the newer version. But after March 2025, only the new version will be out. And as I said before, you can't mix the two. You can't start your project with one version and then start applying the new version halfway through. And equally, you can't start with an old version, the PAS 2035-2019, but actually have certified installers certified to PAS 2030-2023. You must stick with the same version, both for the management of the project and with the installation. The retrofit coordinator, assessor, and installers must be registered through a Trustmark accredited scheme, and there's a list of those available on the Trustmark website. A certificate of compliance must be lodged with Trustmark, along with a number of key project documents. And some of those key documents are listed here. The retrofit objectives, basically that's just stating what outcomes are being targeted at the beginning of the project. So, for instance, are you looking at addressing high levels of fuel poverty? Are you looking at addressing heat demand of a property? So you might have a target heat demand like 90 kilowatt hours per square meter per year, which is the main objective. It could be an EPCC target, but really identifying what are your kind of priority objectives at the beginning of the project. Option evaluation looks at the range of retrofit options that you could be considering for particular property, particular occupants. The ventilation assessment, so some way of demonstrating how you will be compliant with PAS2035 ventilation requirements. The retrofit delivery plan, so a plan of what works are going to be done, how, with what materials, etc. The medium-term retrofit plan, which is really looking at what works should be done in which steps, so that you don't end up doing something to the property which actually prohibits further retrofit work in the future. The different stages of work should be able to add to and reduce incrementally the performance, depending on obviously what funds are available at what time. And it could be about opportunity as well. So you might be doing one lot of retrofit work in line with other asset management, regular improvement or maintenance programs, and then something else happens where, say you're in a tower block and scaffolding is going to be used to do something, then you would be able to do the next stage of retrofit work in line with that. Certificate of compliance, so that's just confirmation that the works have been done to a particular to the standard. And then the monitoring evaluation plan at the bottom there, just a way of verifying that the works that have been completed have yielded the benefits they're designed to. So these are just some of the RISE resources available through the RISE website, and there are links in the notes of these slides to these various different resources. So we've got, as it says there, different podcast toolkits, masterclasses, and other modules that are available. As I say, the links are on the presentation. Some further links here to information on PAS2035 and also PAS2030 through the Retrofit Academy, Trustmark, and the RISE Knowledge Hub are there. There's a few upcoming events that you can also join via the website. And if you've been given notice for this event, you'll no doubt be getting notifications for those as well. And that wraps up the presentation.